Hello, everyone. I'm Yitzhak Hen. I'm the director of the Israel Institute for Advanced Studies, and it is a great pleasure and a considerable honor to welcome you all today to the lecture by Joshua Sobol, the first author in residence at the Israel Institute for Advanced Studies. To introduce Joshua Sobol in a couple of sentences is simply impossible. Just to list the various national and international honors and prizes conferred upon him, and the numerous plays, books, poems, and articles he wrote, will leave no time for him to deliver his own lecture. Hence, all I can do in the short time allocated to me is to give my own personal and rather impressionistic appreciation of Joshua Sobol's work. I think it won't be an exaggeration to say that Joshua Sobol is Israel's most prolific, most famous, and most acclaimed playwright. His plays were performed literally throughout the world, from China to the USA and from Iceland to South Africa. His literary work reached every corner of Israeli culture, and even those who are not part of the theatrical and literary circles of Israel were touched by it. It is enough to mention his poem, Yeladim Ze Simcha, to make every Israeli realize how indebted she or he is to Sobol's creativity and ingenuity. But Joshua Sobol is not just a gifted and creative author. He is also a great fighter for humanistic ideals and societal values. For Sobol, liberté, égalité, et fraternité are not mere cliches associated with the French Revolution. These ideals form the backbone of his worldview and consequently his writing. And his voice in these matters was always loud and clear, even in times of trouble when criticism is not always welcome. And this, to my mind, what makes Joshua Sobol one of the greatest authors of our generation. Inviting Joshua Sobol to be the first ever author in residence at the Israel Institute for Advanced Studies was just a small token of appreciation of his work and long-lasting contribution to Israeli culture and society. We have benefited immensely from his presence at the Institute, and we are all, fellows and staff alike, would like to thank him for what had been an incredible year. That is, of course, before the coronavirus changed our plans. So Joshua Sobol will give an hour lecture, after which there will be some time for questions. So without much ado, Joshua, the floor is all yours. Shai? In a minute, it will come up.
Thank you, Yitzhak. Thank you so much for the introduction. And now let's get to the matter and to the subject of our discussion today, or this presentation. I'm going to tell you about the making of the Polydrama, which is a kind of new form of drama. It all began with a connection between myself and an Austrian director, Paulus Manker, who is also an actor. He played the title role in my play, Weininger's Night, in 1986, I think it was, in Hamburg, in the Deutsche Schauspielhaus. And that's how I came to know him. And then our relationship developed, our working relationship developed when he was going to direct the play and to play again the title role, the Volkstheater in Vienna in 1988, 89. So we had many discussions about what each one of us is looking for in the theater. And we found out that we had a common interest, and that was to move the spectator from his frozen place in his seat in the auditorium as it is in the conventional form of the theater. Because, well, you all know that when you buy a ticket for a show, you buy a certain seat in the auditorium and you are sequestered or confined to that seat from the beginning of the show till the end. And you sit there and you watch whatever is being shown to you, what is being offered to you on the stage. But you cannot choose any different angle of looking at what's going on the stage. You are really condemned to be very passive during the show. You can watch it, you listen, you can work on it in your imagination, in your whatever, but physically you cannot change your point of view, and you cannot become interactive with the show unless, again, we speak about the experience of watching a show. So we both, when we talked with one another about it and we discussed how to change the situation of the spectator in the theater, we had an idea to give the spectator the role of a camera. A camera, I mean the camera in when you're shooting a film or recording a video drama for the television, the camera is not passive. The camera is moving around, it chooses its angle, it travels around you. If I'm the actor, it will travel around me. And the camera is choosing always its distance from the object and so on. So we thought, well, if we can give the spectator the role of a camera, that would already do something in activating the actor more than in the usual situation in the theater. So we were approached at that time, I'm talking about Paulus Manker and myself, in 1994 by the Wiener Wiener Theaterwochen. It's the Vienna Festival of Theater. And they asked us to choose a subject for a play that we will develop for the Theaterwochen, for the Vienna Festival. It was shortly after an interesting book came out in German called Der Vater, which means the father. It was written by a journalist by the name of Niklas Frank, whose father, Hans Frank, was Hitler's Minister of Justice. And then after the occupation of Poland by the Nazis, Hitler appointed him to be the General Commissioner of Poland. And that was the job that he took up during the war. Shortly after the war, he was among the 11 criminals of war, top criminals of war, who were sentenced to death at the Nuremberg trials, and he was hung, was executed in 1946. Nicholas Frank, his son, was born in 1939. A few weeks, I think, before I was born. I was born on the 24th of August 1939. Nicholas was born, if I don't remember exactly, but sometime in, what was it? I don't remember exactly his date of birth. Anyway, I think it was a few weeks before B. So we are of the same age. I met Nicholas, and I met a very interesting person, a very tormented soul, carrying on his shoulders, so to speak, the heritage of his condemned father or his damned father. And his book the father was kind of settling accounts with the father. Nicholas was 6 years old when his father was almost 7 when his father was executed. So he keeps a memory of his father. We became very, very good friends, Nicholas and myself. He visited my place in Tel Aviv. He brought with him pictures. One of them, a photo of him sitting on Hitler's knees as a young boy. And there he was sitting in my flat in Tel Aviv. Anyway, his book is a real cruel, so to speak, parricide book. I mean, not only settling accounts with his father, but really executing him again, so to speak. He tells the story of the leaders of the Nazi party, his father was among them, and they come out in the book as a bunch of idiots in a way, thugs, primitive guys, bullies, and so forth. And well, he tells many stories that are very grotesque, of which he kept a memory, and of which he learned later on stories told in his family. So I sat down with him, with Nicholas, and we wrote a play. And in the play, we told the story of his father with all the grotesque events that took place there, with his relationship with Hitler and so forth. And then the play was written in a way so that it will take place in various spaces in the theater, not as a conventional theater performance. We decided to seat the audience on the stage, on a revolving stage. And the stage that can go down to the downstage and go up and turn in all directions. So, and the audience was seated on a rostrum on the stage, so that they were given the position of a camera. And then we played the various situations of the drama in different, as I said, different places and spaces in the theater. There were situations played in the auditorium, which was empty. We took the stage down, and the audience discovered a scene which was taking place there downstage. We turned them, and so on. And the audience was all the time in movement, so to speak, but not controlling the movement, but being manipulated as a camera. And the show, the Pater, was very successful. And then because of this, the Wiener Festival, they commissioned another play that I should write it, and Paulus Manker, the director, should direct it for the next season, opening in the summer of 1996. So then, before getting to work, we said to one another, listen, we gave the audience the role of camera, but still it was a very dependent camera. The audience was not really controlling where they were being turned and so on, and they were kind of a passive camera. How can we move them, give them freedom? And then the idea was, let us write a play so that it will be divided into many, many scenes, like, let us say, 50 different scenes. And let us divide these 50 scenes into 10 series of 5 scenes each. And let us play these 5 scenes simultaneously in 5 different spaces. Now the audience will be given the freedom to choose where they want to go, each one. We are not going to direct it. We will start the show in one place, let us say in a place where we assemble the entire audience. And then from the prologue, we will let them choose their own way and choose where they want to go and what they want to watch. And we will tell them to behave like a camera, which means you enter a room, you see a scene taking place between an actress and an actor. You are allowed to choose your point of view. There are no seats there, or there will be maybe a sofa, an armchair, a few seats, or but anyway, you are not confined to any seat. You can move around the actors during the acting, and you can choose the distance from the actors. You can go to an extreme close-up, taking a distance of 50 centimeters if you want. Today with the corona situation, it's a bit problematic, but you can take any distance you wish from the actors, and you can also choose to stay afar and watch the scene from a distance. You can turn around the actors like a camera moving around the object, and so on. A camera doesn't speak, and the camera doesn't touch. These were the two limitations we gave the audience. Now we had to choose a subject matter that will be suitable for such a drama. So we had in our mind a form, and we had to fill it up with contents. And so I told Paulus Wanka, listen, I am very interested in a certain lady. Which lady? And I said, Alma Mahler. Why Alma Mahler? I said, because I was interested in Gustav Mahler. I love his music. And I was interested in his destiny as a Jewish director who was at a certain point a victim of a certain degree of anti-Semitism in Vienna at the time. I read a lot about Gustav Mahler. And what happened to me is that Alma Mahler stole my attention. And at a certain point, I became more interested in Alma and her life than in Gustav Mahler's biography. And why? Because Alma, she was born in 1880. And when she was 20, or less than 20 already, she started her career of a young composer. And she had a teacher of piano and composition, musical composition, Zemlinsky, a Jew, by the way. And she was not Jewish, Alma. She was even anti-Semitic. But who is not? As the British say, an anti-Semite is someone who hates Jews more than they deserve. So she hated Jews, maybe a bit more than they deserve anyway. When at the age of 18, she was considered the most attractive young woman in Vienna. The most beautiful, or the most attractive, or the most sexy. Well, standards of beauty change from generation to generation. So if you look at her nowadays, you would say, well, she's a good-looking young girl, but okay. But at the time, she was probably so provocative and attractive that the painter Klimt fell in love with her and followed her all the way from Vienna to Venice in order to be allowed to kiss her. Nothing but a kiss, that's all he got from her. And he painted her later on, made a few representations of her in his paintings. Her composition teacher and music teacher, Zemlinsky, fell totally in love with her, but she did not reciprocate his love. She played with him either way. She let us be free. She let him touch her here and there, and that was all. The director of the Burg Theater fell also in love with her, certain Burkhardt, who didn't fall in love with her. So many men. And she played around with them. At a certain point, she met Gustav Mahler at a kind of dinner in a a Jewish family's place, the family Zuckerkandel, Emma Zuckerkandel. She was a lady, a very important figure in Vienna at the time. And she had a kind of a saloon. And one evening she invited Alma. There was already, as I said, a figure who has cut her silhouette in the landscape of Vienna. And Gustav Mahler, who was the artistic director of the Royal Opera and already an established composer and a very, very much appreciated conductor. So he was 42 years old or so. She was 20. This encounter between the two of them became very, very, how shall I say, fatal. They fell in love with one another. But shortly afterwards, after that evening, Mahler came to her place, to Alma, and he set conditions for marriage. And because they were talking seriously about marrying, and he said, listen, there's no place for two composers under the same roof. So she said, maybe we can live under two different roofs. And he said, no, I'm not joking. I'm talking seriously. And for me, he said, marriage is a very meaningful act. You will be my sky, you will be my whatever, but you will have to give up composing. And he said, because there will be too much envy between the two of us if you are a composer and I'm a composer. And you may even commit suicide as my brother did, because one of Mahler's brothers, who wanted also to be a composer, who couldn't cope with Gustav Mahler's talent, shot himself out of despair or frustration. So he had a good argument, but a very bad beginning for a marriage. Alma said, I have to think about it. He said, okay, but make a decision. And if you're ready to give up your career as a composer, we will marry. She spent a night of soul searching or agonizing, I don't know exactly. Anyway, the next day she spoke to her mother, by the way. Her mother told her not to give up her career. She said it will be a very miserable marriage if you give up your career, for you make such a sacrifice for marrying Mahler. Alma finally decided that it was worthwhile to make that sacrifice. She told him that she was ready to give up her composer's career, and they married. Shortly afterwards, she became pregnant. She gave birth to a girl and then to another girl. But very shortly after the wedding, she started to feel a very deep frustration with the fact that, first of all, that she gave up composing, and then that she became a housewife with these two young girls on her lap. And Mahler, traveling around throughout Europe, conducting concerts in Amsterdam, in Paris, in St. Petersburg, and so on, and having a very active career. So she took to drinking, and she became very soon, I would say, an alcoholic. She developed a special inkling for a certain drink, Benedictine, which is a sweet cognac, very sweet and very rich in alcohol also. So you can imagine she drank a lot, and when the summer came, she always insisted on going to some health resort to recuperate. So on one of these trips to a place called Sobol, when she was already 26 or 27, she met there a young architect, Gropius. He was a few years younger than she was, 6 years younger. He was a burgeoning genius. By the way, Gropius is the one who is responsible for the high-rising buildings. He developed the idea that you can build a higher riser if the walls are not supporting walls, if the walls are only just curtain walls. And the structure is an iron structure, and you can... Anyway, he was then, in the beginning of his career, he was very handsome. He was Aryan. Mother was not. Mother, you can discuss if he was a handsome man or not a handsome man. He was not the epitome of masculinity. If you look at him, Gropius, 6 years younger, well, they had an affair in Tobelbad, in this resort. Gropius fell in love with her. When she returned to Vienna, he couldn't stop. He followed her to Vienna. He went and he sent a letter saying, "I am here. I want to meet you," and so on and so forth. And a love letter, a scalding hot love letter. Only he made one mistake. On the envelope, he wrote, instead of Mrs. Mahler, he wrote Mr. Mahler. So the housemaid who received the post, she put the letter on Mahler's piano, and the Mahler opened the letter and found out that his wife had this love affair. And in the letter, he even said that he's here next to walking on the street and next to the entrance to the garden. He will be walking there until she will call him, something like this. Mother went outside and found him there and called him, invited him to enter the house. And he, at the same time, he called Alma. And the three of them had a kind of threesome encounter. A very interesting dynamic. Mahler said to Alma, "Listen, I know everything. You have to decide if you want to go with Gropius, you are free to go. If you want to stay with me, you have to say goodbye to Gropius. Now, I give you, I don't know, as much time as you need. I'm going upstairs. You will make up your mind." He went upstairs. He sat there and he read the Bible, the Old Testament. I don't know which book of the Old Testament he read, probably the Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. Anyway, at a certain point, she called him and she said, "I decided to stay with you." So he said, "Okay, say goodbye to Gropius." And he accompanied Gropius to the gate and said to him goodbye, very gentlemanly. Only the love affair didn't stop. It went on, but now it went on secretly. Now, I will cut a long story short. At a certain point, she met a biologist, a Viennese biologist, with whom she also had an affair, while continuing somehow the affair with Gropius. In 2010, when the Mahler, shortly after that event, which took place there at Mahler's place, this encounter with Gropius and Alma and all that, Mahler had a crisis of impotence. So he contacted Freud and asked for a meeting. Freud was the time in Leiden, in Holland, but Mahler asked for a meeting. He said, "Come over." Mahler came to Leiden and met Freud. Freud asked him, how much time do we have for an analysis? And Mahler said, "Well, we have like 4 hours because I'm conducting now my 8th symphony in Munich and I have to take the train at 8 o'clock in the evening, and this was 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something like this. So Freud said to him, listen, in 4 hours, I don't know what we can do, but let us take a walk in the streets of Leiden and talk. Anyway, Mahler told him what it was all about, and then Freud told him, he said to him after having listened to the story, he said, listen, Alma, she's looking for a father figure. Because she was in love with her father, Mr. Schindler, who was the painter who died when she was young, and so on and so forth. You are the ideal husband for her. The others are just a plaything. But she's looking for a father figure. So go back to her and take up the role of a father and father her, and she will return. Anyway, she will be yours. Mahler said, thank you, get on the train, sent a telegram to Alma saying, anyway, he wrote a very symbolic telegram in which he promised her that he feels that he has recovered from his crisis of independence. I don't know how he knew it, but anyway, what happened is he returned home after finishing conducting the 8th Symphony in Munich, and they had a very, very, how shall I say, a very good love relationship for 6 months. And then Mahler died of his heart disease. And when he died, you would expect her to marry Gropius, but she did not, because in the meantime, she had already that affair with the pianist biologist. Then, at a certain point, she met Oskar Kokoschka, the painter, and they had a stormy love affair. While she was entertaining from a distance a relationship with Gropius, Kokoschka, who was of Czech origin, he was a very passionate man, and their love affair went to the point of almost madness. She felt that she was going to lose her mind. Fortunately for her, the First World War broke out, and she convinced Kokoschka that he must join the Austrian army and go to the battlefield, because if he will not share the experience of the generation, he will not be able to create a masterpiece. What she wanted really was probably to get rid of him. And he was convinced. He went to the front. He got injured very badly. The rumor came to Vienna as if he fell in the battlefield. The first thing Alma did was to rush to his studio and to take all the paintings where he painted her. And then he came back because he was not killed, he was not dead. He went to Dresden and he got a place to live in the Dresden Museum and so on. And there was a young girl there who was an assistant or a cleaning girl in the museum, Razor, who fell in love with him, but he was still in love with Alma. So he contacted a puppet maker from Munich, sent her all a very detailed description of Alma's figure and the texture of her skin in every part of her body, and asked her to create for him a life-size doll of Alma. And that's what she did, this puppet maker, and she sent him the Alma doll, full life dimension of a copy of Alma. He was so mad about her, so crazy, I mean, that he used to take her out in a wagon, in a cart, to the streets of Dresden, sitting with her at his side and showing her the streets of Dresden. And then, if that was not enough, he took her also to the theater and to the opera, and bought 2 tickets and set her at his side. And everyone in Dresden, well, they said, Kokoschka is crazy with this puppet. Anyway, after a while, he gave a party, invited his friends, and when they were full of booze, they drank a lot, he brought in the Alma puppet and said to them, abuse of her. You can do with her whatever you want. And these friends of his were probably very drunk. They did all kinds of things with the puppet, and at some point he drew out a sword and he took the puppet and decapitated her. And then he called Rezo and told her to throw the remnants of the puppet to the dustbin, and he was, so to speak, free of his fixation on Alma. Now, I'm telling you all these stories. I forgot one thing, that in the meantime, when the World War I broke out, Kokoschka, I told you what happened with him, but Gropius was sent to the French front as a German officer. She stayed in Vienna. She met a young guy called Franz Werfel, a Jew, a young poet who was 12 or 15 years younger than she was. And she started an affair with Werfel. It became very, very passionate also. So she conducted the affair with Werfel while she, at a certain point, she decided still to marry Gropius because he started to become quite successful and so on. At a certain point, Gropius came back for a vacation from leave from the front, from the French front. So she told Werfel, now you have to move aside for a week because my husband has come back from the front. Well, Werfel moved aside for a week. Gropius returned to the front when his leave was finished. And after 2 or 3 weeks, she discovered that she was pregnant, but she didn't know who was the father. If it was Gropius or if it was Werfel. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, at a certain point, Gropius understood that she had the affair with Werfel. They divorced. She married Werfel. With Werfel, she came for a visit to Palestine in 1926 because Werfel had friends from Prague who were pioneers, Zionist pioneers in Israel, Eretz Israel at the time. They returned in 1929 again for a visit to Palestine. They went to kibbutz Hefziba, where Werfel had his friends from Prague as the founders of that kibbutz. There was a whole story there. I will not go into details. Anyway, at a certain point, she wanted to buy a flat in Jerusalem, but somehow it didn't materialize. So I told you all that story about Alma's life, because this is what I told Paulus Manker when he said, what will be the subject matter of our drama, which I described before, with so many scenes, which will be divided into series of 5 scenes in each series. And I said to him, I think that Alma is the best subject matter for such a form of theater because she wrote her autobiography and told her own story about her life. But when you compare it with the people who wrote Mahler's biography, or Werfel's biography, or Gropius's biography, or Kokoschka's biography, because all her husbands and lovers were very famous people and were very interesting guys, so to speak. So their life was researched in great, great detail. Mahler's life, there is a French musicologists who wrote three very, very heavy or very voluminous volumes about Mahler's biography. And when you compare Alma's story about herself, autobiography, with the biographies of written of husbands and lovers, you find all kinds of narratives which don't really match with one another, or sometimes contradict one another. So what is the truth about Alma's life? In other words, I said to Paulus Manker, listen, this is an example of a biography that has been so much researched that at the end of the day, you cannot come with one story about Alma or about her relationship with all these men that she had in her life. And why is she interesting? I said because she's a forerunner of the feminist movement in a way, or she was a kind of very interesting feminist whom contemporary feminists would have a problem with. Because somehow, well, she was a very free woman, very liberated. So liberated that she didn't care about running two or three affairs at the same time. And yet being faithful to each one of them. And giving a new meaning to what is personal freedom. So we decided to do that and to take her life as the contents of our drama, of our polydrama. Why? And I choose the name of polydrama, meaning a drama that takes place in many, many, which is built, so to speak, of many narratives that do not make up one narrative. When you put them together, that can be told in many, many forms. So I wrote about 50 scenes based on all these adventures of Alma's life. And the Wiener Festwochen, when we told them what we need, they gave us a place that was outside Vienna, in the outskirts of Vienna, some 20 minutes traveling by car or train, a place called Hukersdorf, where there was a sanatorium, a derelict sanatorium built in the beginning of the 20th century by the architect Hoffmann, who was one of the architects of the Jugendstil. And they said this place is standing totally empty. You can do with it whatever you wish. Go there and see if it fits your needs. So we went to Pokersdorf, to that place. We saw this Hoffmann-Bau, that building of Hoffmann, a beautiful Jugendstil building, which was destined to be a sanatorium, and it served as a sanatorium till the end of World War II. And then when the Americans occupied that part of Austria, they placed there one of their headquarters of the American army. And when they left and Austria became independent, the place remained without any use, out of use. So there was a huge dining room there for all the inmates of the sanatorium. There was a big kitchen in the basement. There was a huge bathroom with many baths, because at the time, you know, they used to treat mentally sick people by plunging them into kind of hot baths and cold baths and all these things. So there was a huge room with cellar, so to speak, with I don't know, like 20 baths there still. There were rooms, bigger and smaller ones, and there was a beautiful garden around the sanatorium. So we said we can play here, we can divide, we can find 5 different spaces for each series, so that after we begin the show in the dining room, and how do we will we begin it? We will begin it with Alma, old Alma, celebrating her 117th birthday, which was in 1996. I calculated it, that if she were still alive, she would be 117 years old. And there we will have the whole audience gathered together in this dining room. She will deliver her speech, and everything will start there. And then what we will have is she will present her husbands and lovers and all that, and they will all be there. Gropius and Werfel and Kokoschka and Mahler. And Mahler comes later on. I mean, he arrives on his bicycle, and when he enters, it's a big celebration. And then we find out that there is a young woman who addresses Mahler and says to him, I want you to listen to Zemlinsky's music. And he said, who are you? And she said, I am Alma. And what are you doing? And she said, I'm a composer. I wrote music. Yeah. And then comes another young woman, and she says, don't listen to her. She's fake. She's not the real Alma. I am the real Alma. And then comes a third one, and she says, the two of them are imposters. I am the real Alma. And we don't know anymore who is the real Alma, but we see that there are 4 women. One is the old Alma, who is celebrating her 117th birthday. And there are 3 younger women of different ages, by the way. Each one of them saying, I am the real Alma, the 2 others are fake. And then they turn to the audience and they say to the audience, listen, come with me and you will hear the true story. And so each one of the Almas takes with her part of the audience. And the audience, we didn't tell them where to go. They split up according to their, how shall I say, their inclinations. Yeah? Whoever was attracted by one of the Almas would follow her. And so the audience split up into, first of all, 3 parts, but some of them stayed with old Alma, who said, don't listen to these 3 girls. I am the only one, the true one. And then, so the audience split up into these 5 different heads, so to speak. Some of them went after Werfel and Gropius, who started the discussion, who said, they are not interesting. Listen, we have a serious matter to clarify between us. Whose baby was Martin? If I was the father or he was the father? Because each one of us claims that he was the father of baby Martin, who died when he was 7 months old. The whole story. Anyway, the audience split up into 5 groups, so to speak. And then what we did was that each and every scene had the same length as all the other scenes. So imagine 5 scenes begin in 5 different spaces. And the audience is divided between these 5 different spaces, locations, so to speak. And they all finish at the same time, the scenes. They had the length of about between 12 and 15 minutes each scene. Now, when a scene was played to the end, let us say a scene between young Alma and Klimt, yeah, where she tells Klimt that she fell in love with Mahler and she's going to marry Mahler. The scene is finished. Alma goes in one direction, Klimt goes in another direction. Whoever wants to follow Klimt will follow him and find himself, if we had 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E. Now we'll have 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 2E, 5 different new scenes, and who will follow young Alma, who was with Klimt, will go and maybe find himself with Alma having a scene with her mother, in which the mother tells Alma, don't marry Mahler. And the drama between the daughter and the mother. And then when this series is finished, we again split up and we go, and so that each spectator chooses her own way or his own way, and finds herself surfing throughout the whole event, so that after 5 series of that kind, we reach, well, like 1.5 hours of the show. We create an event that brings all the members of the audience again together, assembles them to the place, the dining room. The event was Mahler's funeral, which is in the middle of, it's not in the middle of Alma's life, it's rather after 10 years that she was married to him. But we lead all the members of the audience to that funeral. And from the funeral, they go to the what's the name of it? The wake meal, after the funeral. They are all brought to the dining room, and we serve them, the audience, a very good meal. We sit them so that around round tables that were pre-arranged for them, self-service buffet, drinks on the house, wine, beer, and whatever you want. And the idea was to create a situation where the people will find themselves sharing a seat around the round table where there are like 15 people seated there. And we hope that they will start talking to one another, saying, what have you seen? Have you seen this scene? What scene? The scene where Mahler surprises Gropius. I didn't know there was such a scene. I saw another, and so on, and people will start to tell one another what they saw. So this will kind of activate them where to share with one another the experience of what they had during the show. But what I, again, will remind you that the idea was that each spectator should function as a camera. And what was very interesting is that the people understood it very well. Because nowadays, it was 96, it's 25 years ago, but people already had the habit of filming, so to speak. So there was, for instance, a scene where Alma and Gropius, after Mahler's death, they meet, and they have a lover's scene, making love on a bed. They didn't make love really, but it was not far from that. They were both quite naked, so to speak. People entered the room, found themselves following, let us say, one followed Gropius, someone else followed Alma number 1 of the young Almas, and boom, they were there. And then they found them getting involved in making love, or rather, I would say, to be exact, a foreplay. Yeah, involved in a foreplay, but a very serious foreplay. You saw some people taking a distance and watching the scene from afar. But I saw many times the show, and I saw a few times people coming and sitting on the bed and looking like this, trying to see what's going on there. And peeping really on the, or if you would say, taking an extreme close-up. I'm a camera. I was told that I'm allowed to choose my distance from the object. I'm choosing my distance. Now, you can imagine that during the rehearsals, the actors had a certain problem. They asked, where will be the audience? I'm entering the room. I'm going with, let's say, Alma number one says, or Gropius, they say, okay, we know that we are going to have that scene on the bed. All right. We enter the room. Maybe there will be something already lying on this bed. I don't know, some tired spectator who looked for a place to take some rest. What are we doing then? Our answer was, you tell him if he disturbs you, you tell him, listen, move aside. We have to. It's our bed. We need it. I hope that he will move aside. If he doesn't move aside, get into the bed and do your scene with him lying there. But for whom are we acting? Where will be the audience? And the answer was, we don't know. So we are not acting for anybody. What does it mean? It means you are playing with one another. And this is the meaning of playing. You play. And when you play, you don't play for anybody. If you take two checkmate players, they are involved in their play. There can be an audience around them, watching the game. But they are with one another. They are not involved with the audience. And so we said, you are not involved with the audience. And you don't have any responsibility to project. In an ordinary national theater, actors on the stage, they are obliged to project. I may have an intimate scene with someone, but I have to take care that the lady sitting in row number 25 will hear what I'm saying. I cannot whisper, although it's an intimate scene. So there is a technique of whispering so that row number 25 will understand what you're saying. But here we said, no, you don't have any responsibility. You don't have to project. If someone doesn't hear you, let him come as close to you as he wishes or she wishes. And so if you feel that you have to whisper to one another, whisper. So it was a kind of new, I would say, a new way of acting. It has no longer anything to do with the method acting, the American method acting. It has nothing to do with Stanislavski. It has, of course, nothing to do with Brecht or Brechtian acting. I'm not showing, I am being. So being instead of showing, being instead of acting out something. It is a new way of play acting. There were other questions. For instance, the actors asked, what happens if we enter a room where we have a scene and there's no one there? It may happen. And we said, okay, you act as if the room is full. It doesn't matter because you are not acting for anyone. You are kind of rehearsing the scene, if you want. So, and it did happen sometimes that they began a scene with an empty room and then all of a sudden people came in. And so they came in the middle of a scene. But they were already ready for it. I mean, the spectators. Well, we planned at the beginning 12 performances because we thought that it's very experimental, and we don't know if the audience will follow us or will say, "Ooh, it's not for us." What happened is that after this first or second show already in Purkersdorf, when we opened it, all the 12 shows were sold out, and people bought tickets on a waiting list. And we had to extend the run to 25 shows, 25 performances. So, and every performance was full. It was unbelievable. And the audience, what was interesting is that when the show was over, we started it at 7:30 and we finished at 11 o'clock in the evening. When we finished, there was wine and beer left from the dinner, and it was served on the tables. Whoever wants to stay, people stayed until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to talk and to talk with the actors. Because the actors came out, they had a refreshment after this very strenuous work. People didn't want to go home. They stayed and they went on talking and talking. And now, what happened is, when we finished the run, we had already like 25 shows being sold for next season. People just put their names on the waiting list. So we opened the second season in 97, and it went on and on from summer to summer to summer, because it was a summer show, because part of it took place in the garden outside. And finally, we reached 25 seasons last year, 25 years that the show is running. Unfortunately, we had to replace old Alma because it was an old actress. The first one played like 4 or 5 years, and then she died. And we had to replace her by another actress, an old Alma, and so on. Then we toured with the show. We played a season in Venice, and then we played a season in Lisbon, and then we played a season in Los Angeles, and in Berlin, and in Jerusalem. In 2009, we took the Museum of the Underground Movements, Museum in Jerusalem, which was an old prison from the British and Ottoman times. There is even a gallows room there where the British hanged like 150 terrorists during the 1936-1939 revolt, Arab revolt. Anyway, we played it in many places, and then it returned to Austria and to Vienna, and then to another place in Austria. 25 seasons. And I don't know what will be this summer. Probably we won't play it anymore, thanks to the corona. I don't know. So this is the story of the Polydrama. And what I can say is that people kept coming, the same spectators kept coming on and on, like 7 or 8 times, and telling us that each time they saw a different show because they took a different itinerary throughout the performance. And one guy in Vienna, he said that he swore to us that he saw the show 70 times out of more than 500 times that we played it. And he said, every time I saw a different show, because there are so many combinations possible that you can, I once calculated that you need about 300 years in order to exhaust all the possible combinations of surfing throughout the show. So this is what I can tell you about the Polydrama. There's a lot more to tell, a lot more to say. I can just say that the forum is very adaptable to dealing with historical events, with extraordinary characters, but you can also take the story life of a homeless beggar and make of it a polydrama. Because what we learned, Paulus Manker and myself, from that experience is that a real biography consists of hundreds of episodes which do not add up to one narrative, but you can split up a biography or a historical event into as many narratives as you are capable of writing about it. And so this is that forum that is now open to exploration, further exploration. I have ideas about doing it in Israel with an Israeli subject, but we shall see. And I will be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. If something is intriguing you, or if you want to ask, or you want any information about the show, I'm here to answer your questions. Thank you so much for having attended that presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Yeshua, for a dazzling lecture. Really, it was fascinating. And I can tell you that as an historian, I'm really looking forward to some more polydrama with my own characters. I want to see one on Charlemagne. That should be very juicy. Again, the floor is open for questions, if anyone have one. And at the end, we have a poll that will be grateful if you can fill in before you leave the session. I can also say, Joshua, that I suspect you won't be able to go back to the same sanatorium that you performed in, because it was given to the, and at this very moment, the Central University of Europe is moving there from Budapest after being expelled by Orban and his government. So it's a good cause, but won't be able to perform there. So the floor is open for questions. If any one of you have something to ask, Joshua is willing to answer. Please.
I have a question.
Please.
First of all, I must say, Dr. Sobol, I had the luck to enjoy the show, at least one version out of the many thousands in Venice. Only problem, it was in German, and my German is 0, but I did enjoy it. I just wanted to ask you, what is the relation with the play Tamara? I guess you know it.
I heard about it, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen Tamara.
So I saw it.
Yes, so you can...
I can tell you that one difference, it's a play in one night.
Yes.
Okay. One thing in common, the intermission you eat with the actors.
Well, this is quite meaningful, I think. No, the idea was to give the audience an opportunity.
It's the same idea. It's the same idea, because everyone had another play in Tamara.
Yeah.
Since the play was taking place in 10 or 15 places, and the difference is it's not a biography. There are at least 10 or 15 plays in it. One about the driver, one about Tamara herself, one the painter, one about a revolutionary who wants to kill D'Annunzio, and everything is in the same play.
They are all in the same place.
And no, you go from one. You choose your play. You choose your play. Exactly, and you go around the building. And the instructions were get light shoes, and be prepared for an Italian lunch, dinner, sorry. And that was given in New York for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, I heard about it, but I haven't seen it. So I'm glad to hear that they've also done something in that direction.
Except that it's one night.
One night, yes.
Not a life.
Yeah, one night. Okay. Well, what can I say? There were many experiments of moving the audience or making the audience travel from one place to another, kind of journey shows. and of course, they have something in common, and this is the attempt to interact with the audience.
Mm.
Now, we had, by the way, when we played it in Venice, the interaction was very interesting. At a certain point, we had Mahler's funeral, and we played it in the Palazzo Zenobio in Venice, next to the canal. We came out with the coffin. There was a procession with the coffin. It was already dark. They came with candles and torches. Tourists were on the other side of the canal. They believed it was a real funeral. So we saw people standing on the other side of the canal, taking off their hats, making the sign of the cross. Yeah. And then we placed the coffin on a kind of a small boat, and we went out, so to speak, of the canal in order to go to the place of the burial. And then the story is that the boat breaks up in the middle of the journey, and we have to stop it, and people get off the boat, and there is a conflict between Werfel and Alma. She doesn't want to leave the boat, and he goes with the coffin. So they have a whole discussion. He goes off the boat. Some of the people go with him. Some stay on the boat with Alma. And an old lady came with a poodle, with a dog, just taking a promenade on along the canal. So she stopped to listen to the call going on between Werfel and Alma. And then when he left the boat, she came to him and she said, very good, very good. I tell you, you have to leave this woman. She's a very bad woman. And he said to her, yeah, but she's my wife. She said, no, you should leave her. I listened to what she said to you. You better leave her. And she went on with him, and we all went with them. And she started a whole dialogue with the actor who played Werfel. Now, he didn't know how to get rid of her, because we had to go to a certain point where he had to join his partners for the next season. So at a certain point, he said to her, thank you so much, but I have to go somewhere here. And so she left, and we went with him. And this was a very interesting event that we couldn't, of course, plan it, or we couldn't arrange it. What I'm saying is that the forum is so open in a way that it provokes people to interfere. And so we had also in Lisbon similar events there when we played it in Lisbon and so on. But if anyone wants to now to ask any question, I will be happy to answer if I can.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask.
Yes.
Well, you started by telling us this very nice story of Alma Mahler, and you said this is a story that was telling to an audience. This was in the first half of your talk.
Yes.
But then you say to the actors, you are not acting for someone.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, it's a story worth telling, but now, let's call it the classical theater, you are not storytellers. So, how do you see that?
Well, it's, first of all, I consider it as if people are, as if something takes place on the street. Imagine that there is a conflict breaking out on the street between someone with a bicycle and someone who is walking, and why are you getting on the trottoir, and so on and so forth. And people will stop around them and listen. Now, the two guys who are involved in the conflict, they are not doing it for the audience. they are involved in it with one another. I once saw it on the street in Tel Aviv with a taxi driver who jumped out of his cab, and he had a pistol in his hand because someone blocked his way, and he was apparently going to shoot. And the other guy who came out also with some stick from his car, and when he saw the guy with the pistol, he said to him, "Okay, shoot me. Let me see you," and so on. And we were standing around. You don't know what to do. It was a guy with a gun, and you know these things happen. It was a show. He didn't shoot. The other one didn't beat him with a stick. They just swore at one another, and they got into their cabs and went off. So what I want to say is that the actors in the Polydrama, at least in our Polydrama, were given the same kind of direction, saying, "Listen, you are not at all doing it for the audience. You are doing it as an exercise of actors rehearsing a scene, if you want." Actors improvising with one another something, although they had a very fixed text, because we had the responsibility to start and to finish the scene simultaneously with other scenes that took place at the same time. But the aesthetics of the acting were that you just don't care about the audience. And we said the audience, they are cameras. So act as if you are surrounded with cameras. But you don't act for the cameras. You want to maybe to avoid the cameras, to hide yourself from the cameras. So, and it's their problem to follow you, or to get as close to you as they wish. It created many problems of what it means directing a scene. There were scenes that Paulus Manker couldn't direct because he was involved in other scenes, so he asked me to direct those scenes. There were scenes that neither he nor I had the time to direct, and we left it to the actors. And then at a certain point, Paulus asked me, he said, "Go and see what they are doing in a show in Venice," it was. And I went there and I discovered a scene which I wrote. I didn't know how the actors were going to act it out. I found out that was quite, I would say, quite fascinated by what they were doing. So it is a very open form. And the idea is to make the audience realize that there is no one major narrative that they should take as the narrative. No, to make them understand that every historical event or a biography or any, I would say, meaningful event has many ways of creating narratives about it. And what you learn is that you should become very skeptical about guys who are saying, well, this is the narrative. This is the right narrative. There is no right narrative. So this is one of the, I would say, the lessons that we drew from the work on the Polydrama.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yoshua. Any other comments or questions? If not, I would like to thank you again, Yoshua, for agreeing to come and stay with us for the year, although it was not a full year because of the corona, but we enjoyed immensely your stay at the Institute. And I think, well, there are plenty of people here from the staff and from the fellows who can testify for that. And we do hope to see you again and again coming back to our Institute. You are a full member of the Institute forever now. Oh. So it's your should be your second home. So,
thank you so
much. So thank you very, very much. And thanks for these fantastic lectures.
I just want to, again, to take advantage of this occasion to say that I enjoyed so much attending many events at the Institute. talking with the guys from among the architects or from the guys who dealt with the specialists in the academics who dealt with questions of legislation, of constitution, and so on. And it somehow inspired me to write a play during that stay at the Institute. The play is called Redundant People. And we had a reading on Zoom last week, I think, of the play. I hope very much that when it will be produced, and I hope it will be produced in Israel. By the way, it has been translated into Chinese, and the translator was with us. I don't see her now, I don't know. So maybe the world premiere will take place in China. I'm not sure yet. We shall see. Anyway, the play was written. I was inspired by many things that I heard and with conversations I had with people who participated in this year in the Institute for Advanced Studies. So thank you again for having invited me. And I hope we will have many chances to work again together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming and joining us for our first annual lecture of our authors in residence. Next year, it's going to be Agi Mishol. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.